Thank you,
All
Talia.
right.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Whew. So had some technical difficulties, but we're good now. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of International Education Week. I'm here with my good friend Laura from FIU, who will be presenting on the NCAA process for student athletes. And I see here that we have 10 participants. Laura, I saw a bunch more people register. So if you want, you can wait like a couple of minutes to give the persons who are late a little chance to get here. I know some are in school and we're rushing from class, so we can give them 2-3 minutes before we get started. In the meantime, I see 14 questions. Wow, a bunch of questions here. All right. So someone is interested in track and field, swimming, okay. American football, track and field. Oh, wow, basketball.
Okay. No, I saw that. I was like, excuse me.
Okay, a bunch of athletes here. All right.
I love to see it. I love to see it. That's why we're here, right?
Right? Okay, so Rowan has his hand up. Hold on, let me see. Okay, let me see if I can. All right, Rowan. Okay, I'm gonna give you talking permission. Or if you want, you can just drop your question in the chat or the Q&A. If you're shy.
We're all friends here, but I think we.
All right. I think he's gonna type in the chat.
Well, thank you everyone who is here. If you know of someone who is interested in this session but might not be logged in, tell them to hurry up. We'll wait. But not for too long. Remind your friends. Be like, hey, remember how you wanted to be an athlete when you went to college?
Right?
Now's your chance to find out more.
No, it's a chance, man. All right. So Rowan, if you want, you can ask your question in the chat or in the Q&A. I see that you're interested in soccer.
Oh, I think he logged off, but.
Okay. All right. All right. So it's now, let me put my phone on silent. Okay. 1:09. I think we're good to go. So Laura, take it away.
Well, first and foremost, thank you to you. Thank you to Education USA in Jamaica, in Kingston, really, for having me here today. I love to be able to talk to students, especially about things that, can really impact your college experience and your future career, which not only is the major you pick and the school you go to, but what you do while you're there. And a big part of that is, sports and active lifestyle, especially students that are coming out of Jamaica specifically. You all are very athletically inclined, right? You enjoy being outdoors. You have the great weather for it. There's some things you excel in, right? Not very obviously track and fields and swimmers. We have lots of students who ask me about random sports, like, do you have like competitive table tennis? And I'm like, yes, those are not Division I sports or NCAA sports, but we can go over all of that. I did want to mention that a lot of the things we'll be talking about are general points. Every institution is going to have a slightly different way about how they approach their new recruits, their potential athletes. But these are general guidelines for you. And before we even get into that, I did want to talk to you about how you even start, right? Because a lot of students are like, hey, I'm interested in this sport. Do you have it? Most schools will have the basketball, the baseball, the soccer. So then how do you pick the school? Like, which one's for you? And so I think that's an important first conversation, which is playing sports, whether it's D1, D2, or D3 in the US is really dependent, and that experience is going to be dependent on where you go. So can you see the next slide? Can you guys see that? This, right? It's the map of the US. So please don't be shy. I'm really nice. So ask questions. So I show you the map of the US because there's a lot going on, right? Especially if you're trying to pursue sports. Let's say you wanted to do, I don't wanted to do something like hockey. Would you go to a warm state to play hockey? We have a really great professional, like a hockey team in Florida. Actually, the Panthers are one of the best teams in the country right now, but we don't have a lot of ice around here. There's not a lot of hockey rinks. So you also want to keep that in mind when you're pursuing sports. You want to think about, what regions of the country are good at that and why. And that's going to have a huge impact on the facilities available to you. It's going to have a huge impact on what your training looks like, the funding, the scholarships available to you. If it's a really popular sport in an area that is, very dependent on that sport, then you'll likely have a lot more access to resources than if it was otherwise. So I can use my institution as an example. We are a Division I institution, so we have, like 16 D1 sports, but what are we good at? Think about Florida, think about Miami, it's warm climate, so swimming, volleyball. State of Florida has lots of golf ranges, so golf courses, so pretty good at golf. Soccer, we're champions right now for soccer, and that makes sense because of where we're located. I don't think that we'd be very good at things like, I don't know, like those hockey teams, like we don't have that. And again, it's because we're in Florida. So think about that. When you're looking at schools, just a quick overview, the right type of school for you. There's a formula. Nobody's really got it down pat, but I always like to mention the size, the type, and the location are all going to have an impact on your experience, including if you're an athlete. So if you go to a big school that's public in a location that, can sustain the type of sport you're interested in, then that might be a really good fit for you. If you go to a smaller private school that's in like a more obscure location, but has your sport, then, it might cost a little more to get there because you have to take a couple flights. The tuition might be different. Your access to scholarships could be better or worse because sometimes private schools have more funding to give you. So again, all of those little elements don't seem important when you're just thinking about, I want to be an athlete, but they definitely make a difference, especially if you're an athlete that's being recruited or considering multiple schools. If you're looking at schools that are, if you have an offer from a small school, a medium-sized school, and a big school, all in different parts of the US, how are you going to pick? That's when this formula would come in. That's when you start looking at how much is it going to cost me? How long will it take me to get there? Do they even have my program? Do I want to live in this area? So again, it might not seem like a huge impact or important part of your experience as an athlete, but it does make a difference when you look at it from a larger lens. So in the US, you do have options, right? There's almost 5,000 institutions in the US for colleges and universities. Lots of students will go in the 2-year route. A lot of athletes will actually go in the 2-year route, believe it or not, because those 2 years, you get your core courses out of the way, but a lot of those 2-year institutions will prep you for the major leagues in whatever sport you're interested in. And then you would go for your last 2 years, you could actually transfer out into a D1 school, like a larger school, but you have now history, right? Like you've taken advantage of the resources at a US institution. You've made a name for yourself in the US. And so you can easily transfer into another institution that might be able to better support you on your career trajectory when it comes to being an athlete. So that's a really popular option. Lots of students will start at a 2-year. And I'm a big fan of 2-year institutions, so I'm going to advocate for that route. I think it's a really great choice for a lot of students. And then, there's going to be almost 14 million students will go right into the 4-year route. So you start as a freshman, and that's also a really great option, but it is very competitive. And I'm going to let you know that right now from the jump. We're telling you it is competitive. I know that you might be the best in your school, a national ranked athlete. That's awesome. All the best in the schools, all the national ranked athletes, they're all reaching out to the same D1 schools trying to play. So you being the best of the best in your area or in your region is not new to the coaches that you're talking to, right? They've heard that before. So you need to stand out. And what makes it easier for a coach is when they don't have to pull strings for you. So that's why before we even get into the D1, D2 NCAA process, I want to let you know, you need to get admitted to an institution. That's always what I tell students. Don't ride on your athletic ability. It's going to get you far and it's going to make you great when you become an athlete. But remember, you are a student athlete. So applying to a university, getting in, that's also going to be very, very helpful. in your process of becoming a part of a D1, D2, or D3 institution. Because if a coach has 50 athletes on their list, but you're on that list too, and they don't have to call and pull strings or whatever, and you're just as good as the person above or below you on the list, you're more likely to make it to the top of that list now, because it's easier for them. They don't have to put you through a committee. They don't have to ask you to submit more documents. You don't need to do anything other than show up. So we always like to tell students, keep that in mind. I know a lot of people think, oh, but I'm going to be on the sports team, so it's fine. And like, it could be, but what's an even better way of going about it? Just making your life easier and being admissible. So apply to the universities, make sure you know what documents are required, whether that's a transcript, an SAT, essays, letters of rec, whatever the case is. Eventually, you're going to need to accept your admission if you get in. And for athletes, you're going to have a timeline for when you can talk to coaches, when you should be submitting certain documents. If you are going to be on a visa, you're going to need to apply for that visa as well. So make sure that if you are interested in studying in the US, rule of thumb, this is just like a life hack. Start that process early, because those visa spots get filled up real quick, and then you get mad because you can't come for the term and you have to start online, and it's a mess. So we want to avoid that. And when you get to your institution, there's going to be some things you need to submit as well. So make sure that when you're traveling, ahead of time. Make sure you talk to mom, dad, auntie, whoever has your documents. They give you your immunization records. Make sure that you're all squared away, because you don't want to be the person that shows up to school like, yeah, that's great, you're an athlete, but you're lost in the sauce, right? You have nowhere to go. You don't know what you're doing. And in college, you are an adult, you're operating independently. So if you can do it on the field, on the court, in the gym, then you should be able to do that on the college campus, in the classroom as well. So I do want to make that very clear. You are a student athlete, so you are going to be held to a higher standard, because you are expected to do both things well. Okay, now that like the serious Laura is done with about those deadlines, some of the universities are going to ask you to submit common application or university specific application. The reason why I mention this is because just because you're talking to the coaches doesn't mean you don't need to apply to the school. And that happens all the time. Students are like, oh my gosh, I was talking to the coach. They want me on their team. I'm going to start in fall. I'm like, cool, where's your application? Like, you don't exist. So if you've missed one of our deadlines, fine. If you've missed a second one, sure. But eventually you're going to exhaust, like the computer closes the deadline. So like our applications run on a timer. So it's not even that we don't want you, it's that the application doesn't exist anymore, it's deleted. So you want to be mindful of things like early action, early decision, regular decision, rolling admission. Those are general rules for the application process. But as an athlete as well, you don't want to miss an opportunity to be a starting player, or to take advantage of a funding opportunity or whatever the case, because you thought that you had a foot in the door, when in reality you had to apply. So sure you get that taken care of. And then side note, I always get the question, do I need CSEC? Yes, you need to have at least completed high school. But my favorite is, should I do CAPE? Is it required? Do you schools? Should you? Yes, because it's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. It's going to make your GPA better. It'll qualify you for some scholarships for sure. And also, it's free. Like, you're doing it there and you're getting college credit for it. When you come to the US, you'll likely get tested out of so many of the courses that you would have had to take as a freshman. So save yourself the time, especially athletes where you don't have a lot of time to spend. You're going to be focusing so much on, being the best in your sport, in your, discipline. You don't want to worry about a course that you taken if you were in high school and just gotten out of the way. So I always mention hard work pays off, especially in the classroom when it comes to stuff like that. So those are some things I did want to mention to you. There's two types of athletes. You can transfer in as an athlete, like I said, or you can come in as a freshman. Those are going to be harder of year, depending on the sport, depending on the season. So also when you're looking at institutions, ask, can I transfer into your school and be on your team? Do I have to walk on? Are you recruiting transfers, or do you only recruit freshmen? What are the funding opportunities for me? And this is what I look like as a student, because again, you could be the best of the best as an athlete, but if they don't accept walk-ons as a transfer, then why even bother, right? But if that's the route that you're on. So those are good questions to ask. And just to remember, you're in this process. You don't necessarily have to be an athlete all 4 years. That's another thing that I always tell students. You can start at an institution, and some of the best athletes that we have on our D1 teams are walk-ons, right? A lot of them are recruited after the fact or transfer in. 2 of our Olympic swimmers transferred into our institution. They didn't start at FIU, and that's just how it works. And sometimes it's best for them, sometimes it's best for us. But we accept transfer students and we accept them onto our teams. So be mindful of that when you are looking to be an athlete in these spaces. The type of student you are is going to impact your opportunities. Any questions so far? You guys are real quiet. It's either I'm super good at my job.
So I have a question from Niall.
Okay.
He's asking, what are the requirements for a scholarship? I'm assuming you mean an athletic scholarship now, since we're in the athletic seminar.
Yeah, Niall, if you're still in the room, thumbs up if you mean athletic scholarship. Raise your hand if anything.
He said yes. Yes, yes, miss. So polite.
Miss. So, okay. The athletic scholarships are really going to be based on your institution and the opportunities and the funding available. So oftentimes the coaches will say, we graduated, for instance, you look at the screen right now, it's American football that we have a picture of, right? So oftentimes if they graduate all their quarterbacks, and they need a quarterback, they're gonna make that a very an enticing offer because they're trying to recruit that position. If they have 3 on the bench and 1 on the field, then they don't necessarily need to incentivize that too much. So it also depends on what that team looks like, what that institution's priorities are. So for an institution that's maybe building out a team for the first time, like, hey, we don't have this sport, but we're going to get it. We're finally getting it. They might have some funding because they're trying to kick that off the ground. I will say always, it's hard to advocate for ourselves sometimes. I don't think athletes have a hard time doing this actually, because you all love talking about how good you are and everything. But I will say, make sure you have all of that information in one place, because you are going to be asked to prove it. You're going to be asked to show your credentials. You're going to need to have your coaches advocate for you, to vouch for you. People are going to reach out and ask questions about you. And that'll impact how much funding you get, how much scholarship opportunities you get. Mind you, scholarships will change anywhere from, like, they'll cover your books to maybe just 1 semester of housing. Maybe they'll cover 20% of your tuition. It can vary. Funded, you can be partially funded. It truly varies on the sport. So I would say, number 1, be good at the sport, right? Like, don't try to get a scholarship for a sport that you've never played. That's just not realistic. I also would say it's helpful to be a good student, because that's an incentive for the coaches. If they have a good student that's going to bring up the average GPA of their team, that's a big deal. That's a big deal for their rankings. That's a big deal for our opportunity to be recognized. So it doesn't seem like much, but being a good student goes a long way, even when you're in athletics. I'm going to switch over because I wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of being an athlete. I know most of you already think in this way already. I normally have to talk about this with parents because they're often intimidated with, like, hey, sports, that's kind of frivolous, right? But there's so much more to it. Just because it's not an academic or professional organization doesn't mean that there's not benefits. It requires you to be in a team and to be disciplined. Did you guys know that Division I athletes, and I believe Division II athletes as well, are required to have a certain amount of study hours? They have their own academic advisors. They have only a certain amount of time that they're allowed to be on the field playing, on the field training. They have priority when it comes to registration, because their courses need to meet their scheduling for when they have access to their, fields or courts or the gym. So there's a lot of discipline that comes with that. If you miss a class and you need to make that up, that means that you're probably going to have to make it up in the very little time you had to practice. And if you're not at practice, do you think you're going to be able to play that game? No. So it's very much a disciplined environment. And I want to reiterate that. And maybe that's a conversation you can have with your friends, your families. Remind them about that. You also need to be good at school. I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face. You are a student athlete. So you have your own advisors, sometimes they even build classes out for you. If they don't have an English class that meets the schedule, they'll have an English professor teach at a time that works for your schedule. But that means that they know when you don't show up. And that means that they're committed to making sure that you are doing well, because they didn't just go through all of that for you not to do well in that class. Again, I also mentioned that it impacts the team and the institution. Having that highest average GPA in a conference or in a league is a very, very important thing for an institution, for a university. And so the academic accountability is huge when it comes to being a student athlete. You're held to a higher standard. You think you can get away with a lot. People think like, oh, he's an athlete, you know, like they get to skip class or they get to leave early, but joke's on you, because you have to stay up late and do your homework, because you're not getting a pass for that, because someone's watching. They're literally like, did your athlete turn in their assignment? Because if they didn't, they can't go. So there is some academic accountability there. Networking, relationship building. I do want to mention those together. For instance, we in Miami, the Super Bowl was hosted here recently. Participate in that, whether they were playing football or not. You know, you're working those events. Our athletics department was fully involved in that. If you're you're networking with coaches, with other athletes from around the world, do you think that the only people that go to big events are from that sport? You better believe that there's basketball players going to the Miami FC soccer games, and how many celebrities, superstars, famous chefs, all that go to Miami Heat games. You know, like our students are in those facilities. Our students are connecting with those people. They're going to those mentorship seminars. They're going to those workshops. And you know, we have access to that again, because you're held to a higher caliber. If you're playing a sport in the US at a D1, D2, or even a D3 level, that means that you've shown promise in an area that is above average, and people are investing their time and energy into cultivating that. So there's a lot of access when it comes to networking and relationship building that comes with being an athlete. Some of the perks, you get a priority housing. So you get to sign up for housing first. You get the best buildings. You're all going to be probably in the same building for the same team. So it truly is like always a good time. If you don't get along with your teammates, then maybe it might not be, but you scholarship opportunities as well. Not only do you have the option of maybe being funded by your sport, but remember that academic accountability kind of puts you in a space where you're doing well in school, whether you want to or not. So you end up like, as a result, qualifying for other awards too, that you might not even have really wanted. You know, you're being held to this high standard, so you can apply to other scholarships as well. And then those career pathways and professional opportunities, whether it comes from that networking that you did earlier on, or even being recruited. Like we have some professional athletes that come out of our teams. I don't know if you guys, I know that there was one basketball player in the chat, and I don't know if you know who Isaiah Thomas is, but he used to be our basketball coach. We've had some really great coaches come out of our athletic program. And then, for instance, if you go to a school that's in a city that has major league sports, that's huge, right? Because our facilities are there to be able to sustain those sports. When I can use FIU as an example, when Inter Miami didn't have their sports facility, guess where they trained? You know, guess where they came to our campus, and you have David Beckham at FIU. Are you kidding me? Like what? So it's fine. It's casual. I'm over it, obviously. But you have those facilities available, and students interact with that when those travel teams come, when they're training for things like the World Cup, for even the Olympics. When people want to train for the Olympics in the cold season, they come and they use FIU's like pool, because it's outdoors, it's in warm weather, and it's an Olympic sized pool. So as an athlete, again, you're putting yourself in front of these people who have made it to what your hopeful goal is, and that'll create some opportunities for you. So lots of great things come out of it. And I know that most of you already realize that, but I'm reiterating it because it does need to be said every once in a while, that it's more than just, you know, playing sports in college, but there's a lot to it. So let's talk about D1, D2, and D3. Just by a show of hands, do you guys know what D1, D2, D3 is? You can just raise your hand so I know. If not, that's why I'm here. And if you do, I'll tell you anyway. All right, so we have one hand raised. So one person knows. Cool. Leah, love that. Leah is the only one that knows about D1, D2, and D3. Okay, so, oh, okay. Thank you guys. Thank you. Okay, so people know. I'm so happy. So Division One is probably going to be the most competitive. It's the one that you'll likely see on TV. So if you're looking at basketball, baseball, soccer, swimming, track and field, American football, those D1 schools have the biggest budgets, right? They have the biggest name brands. You'll see like lots of the gear online. You'll be repping those big schools, lots of the celebrities. We have, some famous rappers that even like they love representing this team that you see in this picture right here. So D1 sports are generally going to be the highest, like the highest caliber. It doesn't necessarily mean that Division Two is any less of like level of competition, but more so just the size of the institution and the resources available to those teams at the D1 level is going to just be significantly greater than D2 or D3. And so if you're playing D1, you're basically the major leagues as high as you can go, but at a college level. So that's a pretty big deal. Division Two, which is just, it's basically D1, but on a slightly smaller scale. You're just as skilled. Oftentimes, like, I shouldn't say this, but our D1 teams have played D2 teams in the state of Florida, and like more than once we have not won those games because it's not that they're less of an athlete. It truly is just your school smaller. You're like, you might not have as much of a budget. That might not be the priority of the institution. So you're still getting that exposure. You're still able to play. You can likely get some type of funding, some scholarship, but it won't be at the level that you're playing D1. So normally students will either aim for D1, and if they don't do D1 from the start, you can start at a D2 and then transfer out of a D2 institution and into a D1 space. And that happens all the time, which again, remember, transfer. I'm a big fan of transfer, so keep that in mind. And then D3, that's for fun, guys. If we're playing D3 sports, we're playing because we want to focus on school. School's important to us, but it doesn't mean that we want to stop our sport altogether. So we want to play competitively, but not necessarily be funded as an athlete or get the exposure, be on TV, be recruited, be scouted. You can still in some of those spaces, but for the most part, it's not going to happen at the D3 level. So if somebody has a D3 athletic program, then it's likely, you're playing competitively and, against people your age and very much at a very similar skill set, but not necessarily on the platform or being as exposed as a D2 or D1 athlete. Hope that makes sense, right? So everybody kind of knows. I also like to make it very clear. I know everybody wants to play D1, but I thought I was going to be a D1 volleyball player, but I'm 5'3". I'm never going to be a D1. I like volleyball. I'm not super good at it. So I played intramural volleyball. And as soon as you start to understand, like right now, my skill level is at maybe D2, right? Like I can get recruited into a D2 pretty easily. I can hone that skill in and then transfer into a D1 that maybe is recruiting me out of it or has scouted me or whatever the case is. That's a very reasonable path to take. So don't be discouraged if you're a senior in high school right now and you don't have 5 offers from all Division I schools. It's okay. And that being said, I do want to mention timelines, right? Because that's going to play a huge impact have a huge impact on when and what division you're playing in, if you're going to have any opportunities at all. So let's talk about that. Instead, I don't know what types of institutions you guys are at. Some people are in American or international. Some people are just doing their own curriculum. So I won't ask that question. But normally, when you're in around 10th grade, you're signing up with the Ncaa Eligibility Center. And that's the link that you should be visiting. What this is you're putting yourself on everyone's radar. Right? Any institution that has D1 or D2 sports, basically even D3, but D1 and D2, you want to make sure that you are in this system. I cannot tell you how many times I talked to a student who was like, yeah, I'm going to play for FIU, whatever. And I'm like, cool. So have you talked to the coaches? Yeah, we talked, whatever. I'm like, so you're in the eligibility center. And they're like, what? And a coach won't often entertain you if you are not vetted. And the way to get vetted and to be, like building your reputation for a U.S. institution is first and foremost existing in this eligibility center. It kind of shows them your stats. It shows them who you are, what sport you play. It lets them know if you're going to graduate on time. It requires your counselor to get involved as well, because again, academics is important. It requires credentials, some of your accolades as an athlete. And there's a timeline to this too. So if you're not putting in the work to exist in this space, the coaches will likely not be able to even connect with you, because they also are only allowed to talk to students certain times of the year, for a certain amount of time. And if they don't have your information, they can't do that. It's not like they're just going to fly into Jamaica and be like, oh, I'm going to go watch I heard your high school's playing, it's rival, so I'm going to go watch that game. That it doesn't work like that. But if you become someone that they're interested in and they see that in this eligibility center, when they can reach out to you, they will. And then they'll be able to figure out when they can see you or how they can connect with you. So existing in this is very indicative, in this system is very indicative of how serious you are to be considered an athlete. Normally you would start in about 10th grade. So that's when you're like, I don't know, 14, 15. And then the 11th grade, so the year before you graduate, I don't know if you guys are going to be doing CAPE or CSEC, whatever, but the year before you graduate is when you're going to be required to do a lot of the work, right? Submitting information, because coaches need to start planning their next incoming class. So you as an 11th grader or the year before you graduate, that's who they're looking at. They're looking at who are they going to mold into their new team. So this is when you're going to need to submit lots of your information. And then 12th grade is when we're going to want to know, what your eligibility is. You're gonna have to fill out a survey. Your counselors are gonna have to submit your NCAA core courses. So they're gonna ask you to submit proof of completing some academic criteria, and all of that is gonna play again into your eligibility, and if a coach can connect with you based on the milestones you've reached within this system. So again, if you don't, let's say you don't meet these requirements, or you're like, wow, I'm already in 11th grade and I haven't even done the 10th grade part, that's fine. Get to it. It's never too late, but just set your expectations, manage those, right? And just know that if it doesn't happen because you missed a deadline or you're just finding this out right now, that's okay. It can happen in the future. Just because it doesn't happen right when you start doesn't mean you can't walk onto a team or won't be considered. Once you exist in this space, you can then reach out to a coach. When they can talk to you, if they're interested in you, they will. I promise you that. Because that's their literal job. But they won't be able to do that if you're not vetted. So this is by far the most important piece of information after being a good student, is follow this timeline. So that eligibility center is huge. And it's going to be very important, especially for those D1 or D2 prospects. So that's generally what I like to talk about when it comes to sports. I know we only have about 50 minutes and there's 10 minutes left, I think, for questions, right? I try to keep it, I try not to talk too much, but I like to hear the sound of my own voice. So what can I tell you?
I'm sure we all love it, Laura. So I have two questions for you so far. So is the process of contacting coaches unrealistic without a highlight video?
So I think it's nice to have a highlight video because it shows you're prepared and it kind of adds credential, it credentials you a little. But there's questionnaires. So fill out the questionnaire, like for instance, FIU, we have a questionnaire on our sports page, fill that out. If that team is looking to recruit students, they're going to go into their database and look who filled out that questionnaire. They're asking what they need to know. They might request a highlight video from you later on, but you don't necessarily need one from the jump to be, considered like a prospect at all. It does make a good impression, but also think about how many highlight videos those coaches get every day. So just sometimes it's maybe asking them the question, hey, what do you need from me to show? Like what's a good athlete for you? What are the stats that you would consider a recruit for your team this upcoming year? And sometimes that information is really helpful. I've had people who walk onto our track team because coaches are looking and the student was straight up like, well, you told me I needed this number. I went to another school, I hit this number. And the coach is like, welcome aboard. Truly, it happened just like that. Like I saw it happen over the span of like a semester where the student's like, I went to go run track at another school. I hit the numbers I needed to hit. I got better. I'm stronger. I want to run for FIU. And it worked. but that's a conversation you need to have with the coaches. And he didn't necessarily need a highlight reel. He needed to prove that he met those thresholds, and he did.
Wow, that's awesome. All right. So any guys, please don't be shy. I see 20 something persons here. Ask your questions. So one of the questions that I saw and I answered it by sending them to FIU's website. The student would like to know more about FIU sports and why they should choose FIU.
Well, I can tell you that if you really want the details, you could come to my next session, which
on
is
Thursday, right?
About FIU specifically, and then we could talk all day about my institution. I will say FIU for sports, the state of Florida in general is a really good state for higher education, right? It's ranked the #1 state in the US for higher ed for the public institutions. And then within those 12 public universities in Florida, guess who's ranked #1? So just academically, it's a great school, but then we're also a D1 school. So we have a lot of D1 sports, and it's something that we pride ourselves on. We're one of the few schools that has all of the sports facilities on campus. We don't have to borrow somebody's stadium. We don't have to, like, our home is truly on our campus. So you're playing soccer, you're playing it here. You're swimming, you're doing it on our campus. You're playing baseball here. Your basketball here, volleyball here. We have a sand court, an indoor court, all of that's here. So you have a lot of access to things that maybe not be the case at other institutions. I think every D1 school has its strengths, has its weaknesses. It's about what's the right fit for you. If you're looking to do something like, I don't know, I mentioned before, there's some sports we don't have. So like if you're trying to play tennis, I don't know what to tell you because I literally don't have tennis at FIU. So I can't help you there. But if you're trying to play for like a ranked and champion soccer team, I mean, let's talk, right? Like if you're trying to swim, let's talk. If you're trying to like run, let's talk. So it's those kinds of things. Why FIU? I mean, you tell me, right? What do you want to do? And I'll tell you if we have it.
All right. So we have a student here who, a parent actually, her son plays the Costa Cup football, soccer. That's huge here. So that means, yeah, that's a really talented athlete there. Okay, so Janae, so this is strictly for student athletes. So Laura will be presenting on Thursday. Again, let me drop the webinar links in the chat. So sign up for all the webinars this week. And if you're specifically interested in FIU, Laura is presenting at, let's see here, I had it up at 3 p.m. On Thursday. All right. So any other sports specific, any student athlete specific questions? Are you guys clear on the process of signing up at the Eligibility Center website at NCAA's eligibilitycenter.org?
Well, that's great. So I can talk about
no. Okay. So awesome. They want more clarity. Okay.
Okay, cool. Love that for me. So basically what that requires is those links were shared. Thank you for sharing that. And what you need to do if you want to be considered an athlete in the US for at the college level, a competitive college level, you need to exist on that eligibility center. Coaches will use that as a database to contact their recruits, their prospects. Let's say they don't see you on there initially, but let's say they meet you. They go to a national competition or they go to your school and they meet you. Guess where they're going to look you up? You know, when you're trying to apply for a job or you're trying to look somebody up, a friend of a friend, you Google them. Coaches will go into the eligibility center and they'll look you up there. So if your stats aren't there, if your profile's not updated, that says that you are not a serious athlete to them. So making sure you have an updated, complete eligibility profile is huge when it comes to being recruited for a D1 or D2 sport. So that's what that is used for. That is the #1 tool. There is no such thing as a D1 or D2 athlete, that it does not exist in this system. In order to be a D1 or D2 athlete, you need to exist in the system because you have to meet certain milestones academically with your high school counselor. We need your stats. So fill that out. That is a requirement.
All right. So we have a few more minutes. So any more questions, guys? Now's the chance. Don't be shy.
I'm super nice, I promise.
You know, usually when you're here in person at the college fair, they're not this shy.
No, normally, no, they all, it's so funny too. They're like, you know how students, like they come into a classroom, they sit in the back. Not when I'm doing this presentation, everyone's up front. You have the parents taking notes, people are raising their hand. Well, if I play baseball, when do I need to start? And I'm like, great question, you know? So
exactly. So any questions, guys, you can drop it in the Q&A. All right, what about our basketball persons? I saw at least one person for basketball. I love basketball.
It's probably I enjoy watching swimming and soccer, but I think basketball for me is the most fun to watch.
Right?
Yeah, it's just high energy. I think it's Kamar.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a question. So Evane said you covered everything. Look at that. All right.
It's like I'm good at this or something.
Yes, you're so good. Okay, so I have another question. When is usually the deadline to contact coaches?
Great question. So it depends on what year of school you're in. So I would recommend always checking the eligibility center, because it'll give you a timeline. It'll say, you know, between this month and this month, coaches can contact you. Between this month and this month, you can contact them and they're able to respond. So sometimes students are like, I emailed the coach and they didn't answer. And it's like, well, are you a 10th grader? Well, if you're a 10th grader and it's September, they weren't allowed to answer. So always be mindful of that. The eligibility website is going to have the most up-to-date timeline and policy and restrictions. So just, you know, we can revisit that link. But it's super important to keep that in mind. The coaches oftentimes are not ignoring you. It's just, they can't answer you. So I will also mention, talk to your coaches, your current coaches. If you play for a club sport or a high school team, let them advocate for you, because FIU's coaches might be able to talk to your coach. They just can't talk to you. So also keep that in mind. Coach to coach is a really great way of going about communicating.
Awesome stuff. Okay, so guys, this is live on YouTube, actually. I just had a question about when will this video be available. The answer is it's available right now, my friend. So visit us on, and if you haven't subscribed to the U.S. Embassy's YouTube page, please subscribe. Shameless plug.
No, A1 content. Everybody do it.
All right, guys. So I think we have time for one more question. So if you've been shy this whole time, here's your last chance. We have 1 minute to go.
We gotta thank you. You're welcome.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. So any other questions?
Can't wait for you all to be athletes and then to remember me when you're famous.
Right. Well, I don't see any questions coming. I hope someone's not in the middle of typing because we're about to sign off. So are you guys good? Thumbs up or raise your hand if you're good. Okay. All right. Okay. I see some.
Hey, at least 3 people are good.
At least 3 people. I can't speak for the others. They're probably in class or driving or something. Okay, Reina is good. Okay, awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. And thank you to our audience for attending. So please stick around. We have another session coming up. I'm going to check the calendar real quick. So we have Broward College at
Stephen Mitchell.
Yeah. So a 2-year, well, actually Broward is now has bachelor's degrees now. So yeah, so yeah, so stick around, guys. So we have some fun, exciting sessions for you. And then at 3, we have College of Central Florida. Oh, today is a Florida day.
We're the best.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. And guys, stay tuned. Oh, someone said, thanks, Miss Laura. Enjoy the rest of your day. Look at that.
Ooh, you too. Thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Laura.